Well, glad to have you back. Now, the business and economic relations between Nigeria and the United States stands as a cornerstone of their bilateral ties, reflecting a robust partnership that spans trade, investment, and diplomatic cooperation, with Nigeria being the U.S. second largest trading partner in Africa, and the United States holding the position of the largest foreign investor in Nigeria. These nations have forged a dynamic economic relationship that reinforces mutual prosperity and growth. Given Nigeria's status as the largest economy in Africa and projected to rise as one of the world's top economies by 2030, this alliance is not only significant for the two countries, also resonates across the African continent. Let's put this into perspective. I introduced her earlier. She's the Acting Director General of the Nigerian American Chamber of Commerce. Ms. Wofia Samuel, it's the first time on the show. Thank you so much. It's good to see you.
Thank you very much, Lope. Thank you for hosting me. I'm very honored and pleased, excited to be here. Thank you.
Indeed. Let's look at this relationship. I think it's been an interesting one. But what's your understanding of it? I know it's dated back long, but how has it been, and what more can we do to strengthen it?
Okay, so the U.S.-Nigerian relationship has existed since 1960, from when Nigeria opened its first embassy in the U.S. and when U.S. opened its first embassy in Nigeria. And so far, it's been targeted at prosperity. There's been diverse collaborations between Nigeria and the U.S. Like you mentioned, the U.S. happens to be the second largest investor in Nigeria. With respect to humanitarian aid, the U.S. has shown full support. I would say over the years, from 2015 up until present, the U.S. has invested over $1.5 billion in humanitarian assistance to Nigeria. In 2022 only, the U.S. invested $300 million in Nigeria for humanitarian assistance. Away from humanitarian assistance, with respect to security, the U.S. organizes training and retraining, what's the word now? Training and retraining, capacity building, development workshops for our military, paramilitary, the police. We just concluded one very recently. That's with respect to security, fostering peaceful ties, ensuring that to a reasonable extent, gender violence is curbed to the barest minimum. To a reasonable extent, human trafficking is curbed by some of the trainings that they do organize for Nigeria. And then with respect to education, we have over 1 million Nigerians currently living, studying, and working in the United States, and over 25,000 Americans living and working in Nigeria. So we have Nigerians studying, living, and working in the U.S., over 1 million, and about 25,000 Americans, and living and working here in Nigeria. Then cultural exchange, we have over 100 million Nigerians. I'm sorry, we have over 100,000 Nigerians who are currently in the U.S. for various exchange programs, so learning about U.S. ties, replicating what is here in Nigeria and the U.S., and then getting people from the U.S. to come over here to Nigeria, learning about Nigerian culture, replicating what is in the U.S. and Nigeria. And so the list goes on and on. With respect to agriculture, we have the U.S. has put together the USAID Feed the Future program for Nigeria, where they get to train and retrain persons and skilled workers in the agricultural sector on how to curb losses, that's post-harvest losses, expand storage capacity, expand production capacity, as well as industrialization with respect to transport. So like I did mention, U.S., Nigeria, the list goes on and on. But this is not just U.S., to a reasonable extent, working with Nigeria. Nigeria is also working directly with the U.S., so it's pari passu. We do have lots of Nigerians in various sectors in the U.S. who are doing really well. Actually, Nigeria happens to be one of the countries in Africa, if not the country in Africa, with the highest number of, non-Americans. Meaning, when you're comparing Nigeria to other countries other countries on the continent, we have the highest numbers from Africa residents in the U.S., be it Nigerians or Nigerian Americans, not just because we are the highest population in Africa or the highest economy, but it's because, to a reasonable extent, Nigeria is a very strong federal republic in Africa, and America happens to be a very strong economy in the world. They are world power. So the relationship that we share is a very important one. It's a very critical one. It's a very dynamic one. And lastly, I'd like to say that over the last few years, I think in 2022, when you're looking at the two-way trade between Nigeria and the U.S., Nigeria imported about $5.4 billion worth of goods from the U.S. That was in 2022. We don't have the statistics for 2023. And then speaking to exports, so we imported from U.S. $5.4 billion. And then speaking to imports, $5.2 billion. So the two-way trade between Nigeria and U.S. in the last couple of years, specifically to 2022, has tilted to the tone of more than 10.6 billion.
Yeah.
So that's a lot. And like I did mention, they happen to be our second largest trading partner. 10.6 billion in 1 year is a lot of money.
I like that. I like the figures.
Trade volume.
I like the figures. You know, I deal with figures. I love figures. I love when it comes to numbers, and I like the way you're going all about it. Now, you are the acting director general of the Nigerian American Chamber of Commerce, and when you talk about Chamber of Commerces around the world, they coordinate business activities, deal with the business people and all of that. Tell us how your workings have it been. Has it been trying to synergize, you know, make all of this work out? How has it been at the chambers, and what are you doing to strengthen this relationship?
It's been a very dynamic relationship between Nigeria and America at this point in time. Many thanks to the United States Consulate General. They've been very helpful. They've been very supportive. Just recently, we hosted about 10 businesses from the state of Illinois that were here in Nigeria to explore business collaborations, opportunities with Nigerian businesses. The U.S. Consulate General was deeply involved in the entire setting. The commercial counselor, Julia Mari, supported us immensely. And then we had lots of businesses from cadre A, B, and C, meaning like high-level businesses, medium-scale businesses, as well as small-scale, meeting with all of these people who came. And then the government of Lagos State was very supportive. The Commissioner for Trade, I must commend her, Folashade, was there, you know, with an opening remarks, telling them about the do's and don'ts for businesses in Nigeria. So I'd say that with respect to various aspects of trade, we've been able to facilitate trade between Nigeria and the U.S., and the statistics, the figures are there. But I'd like to say this. So the Nigerian American Chamber of Commerce, we're doing this in three arms. Advocacy. Advocacy is part of what I'm doing here right now, speaking to Nigeria-American business relationships, how far the U.S. has impacted on us and how far we've impacted on them. So that's advocacy, you know, raising a voice on business for both countries. And then networking. Networking is more like the events that we get to organize, the fora, the meetings, and so on and so forth, for businesses to come and learn. We have an AFP coming up in the next couple of weeks, where businesses can come, network, interact with other businesses, share ideas, and of course get more clientele. That's with respect to networking. And then we have trade services. Trade services, we get to research, just like I'm talking about the statistics. That's because the research department has put together all of these statistics where we get to learn, and then we understand the trade volumes between both countries. So I'd say so far the engagements have been immensely beneficial. Right. We are not there. We are not there, but we are not where we used to be. We're making progress.
Let's take this breather. Just allow me to interject you. We have some live feeds from Ondo State. I think Akure precisely, where an aspirant of the All Progressives Congress is having a meeting. I think with party faithfuls and all, we'll be getting those live pictures into. As we continue our conversation, we are on all our platforms. You can continue watching Business Nigeria. Yes, live pictures there for you. From Akure in Ondo
everybody.
State. So,
I'm glad to address Ondo State as one of the aspirants, a leading aspirant of Ondo State.
All right, well, we continue our discussion there on Business Nigeria. I still have the Acting Director General here of the Nigerian American Chamber of Commerce, Wufia Samuel, breaking it down for us. Now, one thing that thrills me in recent times is technology and the opportunities in that space. And I see Nigeria and the United States also leveraging on this. So what do you make of that?
Okay, so America is very big on technology for several reasons. The world is becoming more and more industrialized.
Yeah.
And for emerging nations like Nigeria, emerging continents like Africa to catch up with the world, we have to be technology savvy. So trickle this down to Nigeria, which is US-Nigeria relations. When we look at some of the big giants, the big firms in the US, the Googles of this world, the Microsoft, the Metas, they're all situated and located here in Nigeria, and they're creating jobs, creating prosperity, eliminating poverty one step at a time. So all of these organizations and companies companies do have their offices located here. I've personally been interacting with some of the officials from Meta, as well as Microsoft. Now, you look at Nigeria. For the Nigerian tech sector, we do have some of the biggest giants from Africa situated here in Nigeria, be it Southern Africa, West Africa, East Africa. The technology space in Nigeria cannot be overlooked. So from the likes of Flutterwave, to name a few of them, all of these companies that are situated here in Nigeria have, at one point or the other, studied in the U.S. So it's the knowledge they've gained in the U.S., they intermix the knowledge they've gained in Nigeria and maybe across other countries, and predominantly from the U.S., and then they set up their own technological firms and companies. And so far, it's been working. So for the technology sector, America has several tech-enabled platforms, several tech-enabled events, several tech-enabled fora and conversations that they ensure Nigerians are on, just to further that conversation, further that dialogue on how to enhance tech. What we've done is been amazing. We've seen Nigerians developing lots of apps that have helped to simplify processes of payments. The banking industry is a typical example that has been influenced majorly by technology. And we do know a lot of the CEOs of some of these banks have at some point or the other studied, schooled in the US, lived in the US at some point in time. So you cannot necessarily exclude the impact of the U.S. culture, the U.S. environment, the U.S. investments on some of these people who have come to establish here. So our banking processes have become very seamless. People talk about, oh, Nigeria, a lot of things are cumbersome, and I keep referring to the banking sector. Now you can just get on your mobile phone, do online banking transactions. You don't necessarily have to use the traditional banking apps or traditional banking platforms. You saw what happened with COVID. A lot of non-traditional banking platforms sprung up. These were all created by Nigerians in Nigeria. These are not foreign platforms. So in the area of technology, America holds this very dear. Nigeria also holds this very dear, because if we have to compete with the world in the 21st century, we have to be a globalized and industrialized economy. Technology is inevitable. So this is a sector that is very dear and key to our hearts. And even at the Nigerian American Chamber of Commerce, we've organized several meetings and conversations that are targeted at technology firms, technology giants coming to speak on how they can possibly raise the bar and, eliminates the barriers.
Yes, let's talk about those barriers.
Can
we identify some of those barriers, and how do we get to eliminate them? It's very important.
Okay, so when we talk about barriers, I'm usually very keen to talk about barriers on investments, because when we talk about growing economy, we want people to come and invest. In as much as we trade within ourselves, we also want forex, we want hard currency, foreign currency. So there are some barriers that have impeded investment in Nigeria, and some of these barriers, for instance, number one on my list would be to a reasonable extent our visa procedure, our visa process. So recently I was in Rwanda, and in Rwanda, it's a free visa policy for all Africans. So as long as you can prove that you're coming to Rwanda for something productive, the visa policy is free. You don't have to pay as long as you're from Africa. But for investors, foreigners, of course, you have to pay. Now, for Nigeria, a lot of foreign investors have complained severely about the visa procedures, how cumbersome it is. I've personally had encounters with a lot of people who have come from other countries. So if we can try as much as we can, I do know that the Ministry of Foreign Affairs is doing so much. Congratulations to them. Thank you, Ministry of Foreign Affairs, but we can do more. If we can make our visa process more seamless, that would attract more people into the country. Then away from the visa processes, strengthening our FX. How do you strengthen your foreign? That's another barrier that has impeded investment and growth in Nigeria. Now, FX, it's unstable. The previous speaker spoke extensively about the instability of the market. What will be the benchmark in as much as the Central Bank of Nigeria is putting in all these incentives? So stabilizing our FX market, stabilizing our FX earnings is key to attracting foreign investment. That's been a huge barrier so far. And the only way that can be done and stabilized is if our productivity, meaning our earnings, our foreign exchange earnings, our productivity as a nation outgrows our population.
True.
It automatically reduces inflation. But when you have a situation where population growth far outweighs economic growth, investors would always
drop into the poverty line.
Investors would always be very skeptical.
Yeah.
And then when you're talking about incentives and taxes, that's also a barrier for investment. So incentives and taxes, we don't have a choice. At some point in time, a lot of things should be tax-free. I do know the NIPC has put together several incentives for investors who are coming into Nigeria. If you're coming into Nigeria and you're seeking to invest in the gas, in the gas sector, gas and manufacturing, there's like a 5-year tax holiday, which is a fantastic move. And then I do know that the licensing periods, if you're seeking to invest in the banking sector, maybe you want to get a banking license, the process is now seamless. For telecommunications, NCC, Nigerian Communications Commission, has made it more seamless. For oil and gas, DPR, that's the Department of Petroleum Resources, has made it more seamless, but we also need to do a lot more. And then the final point I would like to establish is corporate governance culture. So a lot of countries in the world are very structured. Gone are the days where people just do things haphazardly. So if you travel from Nigeria, even to Ghana at the airport, you see how organized it is. You understand that some people mean business. So in Nigeria, yes, indeed, we are coming up with our corporate governance culture, but it has to be strengthened just to send that signal to the world and investors that we are serious. I mean, how do we document our procedures? How do we document our protocols? How do we interact with foreigners? How are our agencies, state agencies, meaning agencies, you have different states, because if you're coming to invest in Nigeria, Nigeria is an entity, but it's a means to an end, meaning there are various states across the country. So what is the Investment Promotions Agency in Cross River doing? What are they doing in Edo State? What is the interaction with the Investment Promotion Agency in Abia State? How are they interacting with foreign investors? So the investment promotion agencies, that's the MDAs, parastatals, and agencies in various states, and at the federal level, should try as much as they can to synchronize communication with investors, work more with chambers of commerce like us, because to a reasonable extent, we interact with the locals. What I mean by the locals is people who are directly coming to the U.S., they are always seeking to get information from us. Oh, yeah. So work more with chambers of commerce, trade associations, work more, interagency. NEPC is working more, that's the Nigerian Export Promotions Council, working more with NIPC, Nigerian Investment Promotion Council. There just has to be this synergy. And then the final thing I'd like to say is regional trading. So we need to trade regionally. As much as I do know that African countries are usually caught up with this, what's the word? I wouldn't say pitfall. I would say it's been the norm over time. We prefer exporting our commodities raw, trading with Europe, with Asia, with the US.
Is AFTA going to solve that problem, African Continental Free Trade?
That's a conversation I'd like to have some other time. Definitely, we're hoping, and I am very optimistic.
Great. Then we'll have that conversation some other time, right?
Yes,
deal?
Definitely. Deal.
All right, then go
99% certain that AFTA would solve the problem of exporting raw commodities. Yeah. A lot of countries are already ready to explore the, maximize the benefits of AFTA. So yes. I was talking about cross-border trading. Yes, we need to try as much as we can to trade with neighboring countries a lot more in a more formal and documented way. Improve on trans-border transactions, cross-border trading, especially across countries that are close to you. Why? I see no reason why, you're traveling, let's say you're traveling across Benin Republic, you're traveling across Ghana, Cote d'Ivoire. These are very practical examples. Yeah. There's so much of trade going on, but it's almost informal. We're so caught up with the immigration procedures. There's just so much of barriers to entry. Can we limit these barriers to entry to a reasonable extent and allow people to trade more freely? I mean, we are trading across Africa. Mm-hmm. It's not like we're trying to trade Africa and Europe. So trans-border transactions have to be more formal, more transparent, and then to a reasonable extent, just like we are doing in advocacy, continue to push for the good sides of your country. You never know who is listening or watching.
Interesting. Almost finally, I wanted to ask you, because I looked at exports, that's Nigeria to United States, and it's mostly crude oil, cashew nuts, some animal feeds and all of that. I'm thinking, you are the chambers. What other opportunities do you see? Oh, we've touched on technology, but what more do you see? I know you have more you could think that Nigeria could take advantage of, or maybe both countries at least. It should be a win-win for both parties.
Yes, it should be a win-win for both parties, like you did mention. Over time, I think our focus has been more on crude oil.
It has been?
Yes, it's been more on the oil and gas, the process from crude oil when we export to other countries. But gradually, we're beginning to look at other sectors, manufacturing. What are we manufacturing we think America can get? Let me give you a practical example. So we've had some Americans from the U.S. coming to see how they could possibly manufacture some of their, some of their equipment in Nigeria at cost-effective prices. Yeah. The same quality, the same standard, but at cost-effective prices. That way, you're creating jobs for us. You're creating jobs for Nigeria. You're expanding our market, but you're maintaining the same quality. I mean, I've seen a lot of American companies do this with so many other countries. Why are they not doing that in Nigeria? So that's one aspect we can expand, the aspect of manufacturing, ensuring that our quality measures up with what is expected in the U.S. And then agriculture is also another sector we can look at. But the issue we've had with agriculture is a lot of times some of the commodities we've exported to the U.S. do not necessarily measure up standards. And so some of these companies are sent back to us. And now Standards Organizations of Nigeria, NAFDAC, to name a few of them, they have a huge role to play in this. So for the agricultural sector, there are immense opportunities. So manufacturing, agriculture, when you talk about manufacturing, including textiles. So you know, we need to, AGWA is coming to an end in 2025. That's the African Growth and Opportunities Act. Nigeria has not maximized the benefits of AGWA extensively.
Yeah,
so if you look at South Africa, for instance, you're just talking now about what can we possibly export to the U.S. South Africa's non-oil exports to have dominated their exports to AGWA, non-oil. So South Africa has made more, what's the word now? They've utilized AGWA on a scorecard that is more than 70%. And this has mostly been from non-oil exports. This has mostly been from finished commodities, not necessarily exporting raw commodities. So for me, I'm a huge advocate of the agricultural sector, the manufacturing sector. But to also just finalize the point, my response to the question you've asked, U.S. has a framework for Africa. There's a framework U.S. created in 2000 for Africa. So we need to we need to return to that framework and then see what areas America is interested in. What are the products, what are the services, what are the commodities you think they desire? Because at the end of the day, every country has their priorities. Every country has their priority products. So you just cannot be exporting everything. You're producing and wanting to export everything to the U.S. What are the priority sectors? Look through the framework for Africa and then see through what America would like to have Nigeria export to them. Make sure it's up to quality, and then we can run the test.
Interesting conversation, I must say. Wufia Samuel, thank you so much, Acting Director General at the Nigerian American Chamber of Commerce.
Thank you.
We hope to have you again in soon. It's really good to have this chat with you. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
All right, then.
Thank you.
Well,